Hello rebels and welcome back to my life. So yesterday we talked about how most white people in America are more comfortable protesting a lion being killed in Zimbabwe than they are to protest American police killing unarmed black people. The only reason this issue is getting any attention is because there is a movement behind it. They are online, they are in the media, they are speaking out against police brutality, and they are making a difference. DeRay McKesson and Janetta Elzie are two leaders of the Black Lives movement that I've been following since Ferguson of last year, and ever since then they've been subjected to non-stop attack and harassment, both online and off. Sometimes these attacks come in the form of blatantly racist tirades, but sometimes it comes in the form of seemingly legitimate criticism designed to undermine their credibility, and one of the most common forms of this criticism is to compare them to Martin Luther King Jr. King is, of course, one of the most revered figures in American history, one of the few people that nearly everyone can agree had a net positive impact on the American way of life. So it seems like such a sick burn to say that DeRay and Janetta aren't as good as he was. It's also incredibly disrespectful to his legacy, displays a blatant streak of both racism and faux-stalgia, and is just stupid. Martin Luther King Jr. lived from the 20s to the 60s. Our world is completely different from his world. America is a different country, even if African Americans face mostly the same threats. Of course, civil rights leaders today are different from King. Of course they focus on slightly different issues, and of course they organize their protests differently. They live in this world, not the 60s. Claiming that their difference makes them inherently worse than King is an illogical statement based on the demonstrably false concept that nothing is as good as it used to be, and everything was better back in the old days. Let's face it, the people who rail against and post tirades about today's civil rights leaders are the intellectual descendants of the people who rabidly frothed about Martin Luther King Jr. when he was alive. And incidentally, those people used to compare Martin Luther King Jr. to people like Frederick Douglass, saying that King was too much of a rabble-rouser and a troublemaker, and that he should have tried to be more like Douglass, who himself was criticized when he was talking about and working for abolition, of course. The civil rights activists of the present, whether you're talking about the present now or the present in the 60s, are never good enough for these people, who always want to harken back to a time when black people were more respectful, i.e. knew their place. What these critics actually long for is a time when their narrow-minded and racist viewpoints were respected by the very people those viewpoints were used to oppress. There is not and will never be a civil rights movement that is good enough for these people because they don't want a civil rights movement at all. This is easily proven by the fact that they never point to or highlight any modern protester who is doing it right, because there is no right way to do it in their eyes. They don't want their racism and their societal privilege threatened, and the Black Lives Matter movement definitely looks like a threat when your worldview is that warped and twisted. To these people, the only safe civil rights protester is a dead civil rights protester. They only praise the ones they've already killed. The dead ones are no danger. They provide no threat. And even worse, they can be used as weapons to silence the protesters of today. Think about the perversion it takes to use Martin Luther King Jr.'s name and legacy to try and silence civil rights protesters today. King was not quiet. He would not go away. He was nonviolent, but he was not peaceful. And he definitely would not have told the Black Lives Matter movement to shut up and go home. Peace is all fine and good until it's used as a tool of suppression by the people in power. When you tell an oppressed minority that you want peace, what you're actually saying is that you want their submission, and frankly, they're not buying that crap anymore. Thank you for watching, Rebels. As I said yesterday, my voice is not the important one in this conversation, and in the description there are links to several modern civil rights activists who I think you should be listening to. A special shout out to my supporters on Patreon who make my whole YouTube channel possible, especially my sponsors, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!